Got a few more seconds. Okay, it's 10 o'clock. Hi, everyone. As we are waiting for everyone to join, we just want to say thank you for joining us today. And I see some of you guys are wearing your colors, so thank you for joining us in that as well. This committee is an ad hoc committee that due to the COVID-19 pandemic was established as the Crisis Response Committee, and we're going to do a brief introduction of each of the committee members and then start our presentation. So I'll start off since I'm already talking. I am Trisha Goga. I am the co-operations chair and the next year's treasurer-elect for OSPA. And then I work at the Oklahoma State Department of Education as one of their crisis team school psychologists. And the next person I have is Sarah Rich.
There we go. Couldn't find my mouse. Hi, I'm Sarah Rich. I am the past president of OSPA and serving on this community. And then my day job is working as a school psychologist with OSU Center for Health Sciences.
Okay, the next one on my list is Dr. Catherine Moore.
Hi, I'm Catherine Moore, and I am currently serving as the Communications Committee co-chair with Brittany Stein, and I currently work in a private practice setting in Edmond, Oklahoma as a psychologist.
Dr. Erica Ollinger.
Morning, everybody. I'm Erica Ollinger. I'm the other crisis team school psychologist at OSDE, and I am the NASP delegate on the OSPA board.
And then Jackie Johns.
Good morning, everybody. This is Jackie Johns. Day-to-day, I work in Collinsville Public Schools. I'm the school psychologist and the mental health coordinator and special services coordinator. And for OSPA, I am the current Eastern representative and the president-elect for next year. And I'm joining you all from Iowa today. I finally got to go see my parents, so that's why I'm a little more relaxed, but it's nice that we have the ability to use technology from anywhere, so I'm glad I could still participate in the meeting.
Awesome. Okay, so Erica, could you share that presentation? Perfect. Okay, so these are our next 3 meetings. The next one is June 24th, and it's going to cover best practice considerations for assessment and evaluation during distance learning. We did receive a few questions on the registration for this time that have to do with that topic, and so we're going to table those questions for right now until our next meeting, so that we'll address those then. Then we have our July 8th meeting, which is tele-intervention and progress monitoring strategies for academic and behavior. And then July 22nd, our school reentry planning for school psychologists. And back to that June 24th meeting, we did decide to continue with this theme of dress up just to make things fun for summer. And we're gonna go with an animal or camo print theme. If you really wanna go all out, you can go the Joe Exotic route. And so we look forward to seeing all of your crazy outfits on that June 24th meeting. Also for June 24th, we are calling, we'd love to hear some of the things that you guys have done or things that you have come across as far as webinars or professional development, to share resources on how to provide best practice considerations for assessment in this upcoming year. So if you would like to speak on that next webinar, please reach out to us, and our contacts will be shared at the very end of this meeting, as well as we can provide them in the chat box. Let's see. Okay, the next thing we're gonna go over is rules of engagement, and Jackie's gonna take over for that.
All right, so if you guys can all go ahead and in the chat box, just enter your information, your name, your position, maybe where you work, so we kind of have a better understanding of who all of our audience is. And we also, thank you, Catherine, I was going to say, we just try to always put in the chat box what our email is, so that if you do have any questions for us, you can easily find it in there and contact us. Make sure that you've muted your microphones when you're not talking, please. And then if you do have any questions, also feel free to put those in the chat box, and we're going to be checking them throughout. We're all going to take turns checking it throughout so that we can try to address any of the questions any of you have. All right, thanks.
Okay, I think it's me. This is Erica again. And just to introduce today's topic, we're going to be starting with just a quick overview of the newly adopted NASP standards, particularly the practice model, and how we can use that practice model to advocate for school psychologists at all times, but particularly right now in the wake of COVID-19 and other world events that are significantly affecting, of course, schools and our practice within schools and communities that support schools. And so the agenda will be, I'm just going to quickly talk about the standards and what they look like, and a little bit about the process. And then we have several guest speakers today from the field who have much more exciting information about how they have applied the practice model domains in new and creative ways. And then we hope to open the floor for other ideas and share outs from the field as well. So just to get started here, the professional standards were voted on officially by the NASP Leadership Assembly on March 8th, and they technically go into effect on July 1st, but people are really just starting to use them now and phase them in now. In case you don't know the process, it's, we do update the standards about every 10 years. And it's a very rigorous process. And so the NASP leadership groups and delegates and board, as well as committees and appointed leaders, and then also just leaders in the field of school psychology and stakeholders all get together. And it really takes about 4 years, start to finish, just kind of for the adoption process. And committees are already looking at changes and updates that may have to be made in the next 10 years. What comes out of this very rigorous process is a set of 4 related documents, and I'm sure you're familiar with them: the Principles for Professional Ethics, Standards for Graduate Prep of School Psychologists, and Standards for the Credentialing of School Psychologists, as well as the one we're going to focus on today, which is the Model for Comprehensive and Integrated School Psychological Services. And school psychologists like long names, but then they shorten, so we really just call it the practice model. So that's what we're going to focus on today, but I would encourage you to read at least the ethics and the practice model in their entirety. And then for our trainers or students or others involved in grad prep or credentialing, certainly our internship supervisors, you might find the other documents informative as well. But for the remainder of the presentation, we're really going to focus on the practice model. And I'm just going to talk about a few of the changes from the 2010 standards to the new 2020 standards. One of the ones that's I think fun to point out is that they did update essentially the graphic for the practice model. So what we used to call the house over here is no longer the visual representation of our practice model. It's now this more circular, and it's supposed to sort of incite a sense of interconnectedness, of flowing together, and of being ever changing. So a little less static than the house. It's supposed to represent, of course, how all of our practices flow together. On the outside of the circle, sort of in the blue continuum, that would represent our organizational principles. And what is important about that is that our practice model isn't just to guide us as school psychologists, but also is meant to be used as information and an advocacy tool to those that employ us, those that use our services, those that create legislation around topics that are of interest of us. So the blue, the organizational principles, really are supports and responsibilities of the organizations that would employ us, or organizational conditions that really set us up to be able to practice our domains. So I like to think of it, you know, as it's circular here, but sort of as tier 1 supports that we need from the Oklahoma State Department of Education and from our districts and from other folks that are employing us and that support our work. And then of course in the middle, kind of on the green, the lime green continuum, those are our domains, which still speak to basic skills and practices that we are trained in, that we are competent in, and that we infuse in our practice every day. And then in the innermost circle is just reminding that there are some practices that permeate all of our services, such as database decision-making and consultation. We also provide direct services in terms of academics and behavior, indirect services, and that with all of those, we're always grounded in our legal, ethical, and professional practice. We're always grounded in research, and we're always grounded in what is now called equitable practice for diverse populations. So that's a really quick overview. And again, I would encourage you to get on, and we can include the link in the chat in a moment to the literature that goes with this. This is just the graphic that represents the model. So what's new? What are some of the changes? So there were no substantive deletions. So everything of substance from the 2010 standards were still included and maintained in the practice model. But they tried to improve, we tried to improve and add on to the parts that stakeholders told us were important. So more emphasis on those organizational principles that we can use as an advocacy tool for those who employ us. Infused more language that's consistent with the NASP strategic goals. So there are 5 goals that sort of drive our practice and our advocacy right now. So we interweave language to include those. Updated our terminology to be more modern and contemporary and respectful and inclusive. And then some of the domain titles went through some changes. All the domains themselves are similar in content, but some of the titles did change. So you can see here, for example, the one I pointed out earlier, domain 8 was diversity and development and learning. So the updated, more contemporary language is equitable practices for diverse populations. Domain 9 went from research and program evaluation to research and evidence-based practices. Domain 7 now includes community, very specifically as part of our collaboration efforts. So again, the intent and a lot of the meaningful content of the domains didn't change, but we did update some of the titles and I think made some good and meaningful change. Other quick changes are throughout, you'll read more that there's increased emphasis on social justice, which I think is very timely given current world events, and then also advocacy. And one of the things that many of us love is that there's much more about mental health and social emotional learning. And so within the model, it speaks more specifically to areas surrounding mental health and SEL, like trauma, threat assessment, and those other things linked there, as well as overall school climate and prevention. Also, another thing we love is that there was improved discussion and terminology about multi-tiered systems of support and other system level services and problem solving. So a lot of that language is more forward in the current practice model, and more emphasis and guidance about professional supervision and professional development, because of course, one of the things that sets us apart, particularly those of us that are credentialed through NASP, is that we do have ongoing professional development so that we're always on the forefront of our practice standards. And then in places where it seemed muddy, there was much clarification about many roles that school psychologists can fill and the importance of us as practitioners and of our stakeholders and supporters in promoting that role. And that's what I'm excited to get to today, is to have other folks talk about how they're using the model or different ways that they're increasing their roles, given that we are in a new and different environment. And the last main revision I'm going to talk about, which was kind of the big one, is the big change and the one that I think promoted the most discussion, is in the new practice model, the recommended ratio changed and it's now 1 to 500. And I can hear your collective groans as in Oklahoma, we are far from this, but the intent of the model, it's not rules, it's not, you know, laws, it's really meant to be aspirational in nature. It's meant to guide us and it's meant to help us set goals. And we truly feel like the goal for our profession, even if we're not there yet, should be more like 1 to 500. And knowing that these documents and this recommended ratio is going to stick with us for about 10 years, over a 10-year time span, that if we have it in writing, then that lets us and the world know that our goal is to improve and increase school psychologists and the awesome services that we provide. So that was probably the most debated and most significant change, and it is now 1 to 500. Previously, they had a range, and we even took out the range. We just set a flat 1 to 500. So those are the main changes to the model. I'm not going to go through each standard. I would ask you to do that yourself and to read through those domains. I think it's important to do that, maybe add to your summer reading list. I just gave one example. So this is just an example from domain 9. Again, it did go through a name change. This is what it looked like in 2010. And then this is now what it looks like in the 2020 standards. And I apologize for the watermark. The in-press will stay there until July 1st when they are officially in place. So I apologize for the watermark, but you can just see the difference between what 2010 looks like and then the work that was developed out of the 2020 standards. This is just one domain, and each of them has been updated, and I think we've made some really meaningful changes. So before we go on then to our guest speakers, which I think will be the more interesting part of today, are there any questions in the chat box or any questions from the field about the standards revision or the process or anything I spoke of? Was there anything in the box, Catherine? Okay, then let's just move right on into, we have 4 practitioners from that are doing different kinds of work in different places across Oklahoma in different stages of their careers, and they all have some meaningful information to share about new things that they're doing that are related to our practice as a whole, and they might be able to tie them to some of the domains just to help us all think about creative ways to start expanding the services that we provide. And so I have Dr. Brittany Stein who's going to go first. Brittany, I'm going to go on mute and I'm going to take off my screen in case you have something to share from your screen. And I'll just let you introduce yourself if that's okay. So without further ado, Dr. Brittany Stein.
Hi, well, I didn't prepare a formal slide presentation because I just wanted to talk about some of the things that we're doing, and I'm so excited to be here with you guys. This just like energizes me each week to see all of your faces, and I'm sad we didn't get to see each other at the conference. So everyone who's laughing at me right now like knows me in person from being on a committee and is like, Brittany, we have not had enough coffee to deal with you this morning. So I apologize. So just like she said, I'm Brittany Stein, and I'm a school psych and health service psychologist. And I wanted, before Daniel and I presented, to just real quick, we have a really unique role as school psychologists in that the cooperative that we work for isn't a traditional co-op. So we are almost completely funded via grants that are written. And so we do have a psychometrist who's our special ed director and speech pathologist who are funded via IDEA funds and do that more traditional money flows in, they provide services out. But the work that we do, as well as Micah Shelton, who works with us, and Sarah Rich, who contracts with us, we all do, is funded through these grant-based projects that we write to really implement different initiatives and reforms and things like that that we see our schools need. And so I actually came to OCIC via way of a school climate transformation grant, which has really dictated and pushed forward the work that I do in prevention and MTSS. And so when I'm talking to you today, it's really coming from the lens of the domains of domain 2, so consultation and collaboration, and domain 5 of school-wide practices to promote learning, because we do the more traditional school psych services of assessment, and we have phenomenal OSU practicum students that we get to work with and supervise that provide those services. But the unique thing that we do is really try to push forward the implementation of MTSS. And so you guys know now more than ever, MTSS, PBIS, these things are so critical. And we've actually been reworking our trainings to better integrate SEL. So I think, especially like in my training coming from OSU, being very behavioral in my theoretical orientation, social emotional learning is something that we kind of learn tangentially as psychologists, and it's a part of it, but really, you know, looking at things through a trauma-informed lens and really like explicit teaching of SEL versus just calling it social skills, which is how I learned it, has become so big. And so one of the things that we've really worked to do is to work closely with the school counselor on my team, is phenomenal and has so much excitement and passion for SEL. And so we decided that going forward, especially this summer, any trainings that we've done and supports that we provide for our member districts, is what we call them, is we are fully integrated. So they do not see it as PBIS here and you need to do SEL here and these are trauma-informed practices. Like, it's all being integrated in actually the same PDs. And so like we're collaborating with our instructional coaches who also work out of our offices. And so I think that's something school psychologists, we usually sometimes stay in our lane. So some of you I see are like your RTI coordinators, and so you might get to work with instructional coaches and teachers. Some of you are more in the testing role. And I've really found that Daniel and Micah and I end up, because of the depth of our training and all those different, practice models areas, that we find ourselves being able to stretch ourselves further the more effectively we do internal consultation with the other specialists that we work with. So I shifted from really, I miss being with the students, but getting to be out in my schools with the students, to devoting some more of my efforts to being in the office and working with my school counselor, working with our instructional coaches who are going out and doing tier 1 core instruction training or supports on effective classroom management to help guide them in, here's what research-based practice is, or I've finally maybe gotten them all on board with we need data at all times. And so Daniel and I frequently get people marching into our offices saying, how do we measure this? How do we actually measure this? And so with that, we've all combined together to do a virtual library or a virtual summer PD. And so we've got 6 strands, and it's all being presented as a unified front. So we've got everything from Google Tools, Google Classroom, blended virtual learning. We've got school climate and mental health together. We've got supporting at-risk learners and special education. And I think this is really important when talking about collaboration, because the initial push was, let's separate it. Let's do the instructional coaches and the instructional team do how to do blended learning, how to do Google Classroom, and then you guys do all of your behavior and special ed stuff over here. And we really tried to advocate, no, it needs to all be together, because in this instance, we know all of our teachers, they're so overwhelmed, right? And their first concern is, how do I use Google Classroom? What do I do? I've got to figure out how I teach. But then we know when we get back to school, there are going to be so many kids that need support for behaviors, or they're really behind and they're going to need us. And so we kind of pushed that we wanted to be a part of whatever else is going on and let our content be there so teachers could go ahead and access it, come to webinars early on, and that would set us up for better consultation in the fall. So with I mentioned the like integrating the SEL. I'm a big PBIS person and MTSS, and so a lot of training we've done for our schools is on the basics of Tier 1 prevention, and I think Sarah, Daniel, and I are on a really big like prevent, teach, reinforce, respond kick. And I kind of find myself looking at everything I do through that lens of how are we preventing problematic behaviors? How are we teaching appropriate behaviors? Heavy emphasis on SEL incorporating in there. How do we reinforce what's appropriate and how do we respond? And so we're trying to fit in there, not just behavior, but emphasize mental health. I got the 1 minute wrap up. So before I go, the last thing is, as schools are finally open to doing mental health screening tools, my other big goal is making sure they see that as not a new initiative, that is wrapped into what we're already doing for MTSS, and we're using that data in conjunction with ODRs, attendance data, all those things. Done. Yeah.
Thank you, Brittany. As kind of as a final part for that, when you talk about screening tools, is there a resource that psychologists can go to that maybe summarizes the available screening tools for those social emotional supports?
Yes. My favorite website that I give to everyone is one out of Kansas, one of their MTSS projects they've been doing forever, and I will put a link to it in the chat box. It does an overview and has the article links to each of the tools.
Perfect. That would be very helpful. And I think then that's a natural transition to Dr. Daniel Anderson, who also works with Brittany at OCIC, but he's going to talk to us a little bit more about kind of specific issues they've dealt with during this time of COVID and their practice domains. So Daniel, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Okay, well, first of all, I just want to say thank you for asking me to present. I feel really honored to present in front of all of my colleagues in the state. So thank you for asking me to present. It's good to see everyone today. I appreciate how Dr. Stein gave you all a good sort of high level overview of what we do. And like Sarah said, I wanted to, when I was thinking about what I wanted to present, I was thinking of a specific instance that happened at one of our schools, and what we did and how we navigated it. Since we are a cooperative and we aren't building-based school psychologists, sometimes we struggle a little bit with really trying to provide great services and support kids as much as possible, because we often have a lot of barriers with admin and teachers. So I wanted to talk about an instance that happened at one of our schools. Just to give you all context, we work in very rural Oklahoma. Like some of our schools, they have first and second grade in the same classroom. So very small communities. And during COVID-19, during distance learning, one of our schools unfortunately had a student pass away. So first of all, I also want to point out, one of the first things we did was we reached out to Erica Olinger, as she's one of the crisis school psychologists, and I can't thank her enough of how useful her support was. I mean, she was immediately available on a Sunday night when we all found out, and how useful the resources were that she gave to us. So if you're ever in a crisis situation, I highly recommend to reach out to one of the crisis school psychologists at the State Department. But one of the areas of need that the school was asking for was just how to communicate that a student died to parents, to teachers were saying, we don't know what to say. And so we created scripts for them to use that they could use virtually. And we also created sort of a communication piece to parents as well. Another need that we noticed was the special ed teacher had a relationship with the student and was also struggling in how to speak to students with disabilities about death. So one thing that we did, that one of the grad students and I did, was we created a document specific to how to speak to students with disabilities about grieving and death. I will share my screen just briefly so you can see what we created. And so it's just a brief 2-page document on some things to look for in the grieving process for individuals with disabilities and how parents and teachers can support those students. So I'm happy to share this with everyone. I sent it to Dr. Rich before this meeting today, so she can share out to everybody. But yeah, so I thought that was a great example of the domain 4, mental and behavioral health services and interventions, and also domain 6, services to promote safe and supportive schools, as we were responding to a crisis during a crisis. So again, thank you for asking me to speak, but that's all I had.
Yeah, thanks, Daniel. And I emailed everyone a link to some resources, and we will also post that link in the chat box. And that particular document is already saved in there. And Daniel was able to develop that with his school psychology training, and also as an intern, he worked with adults with disabilities, and that was quite a common situation that he dealt with there of the grieving process. And so being able to recognize the things that need to be adapted for that specific population. Anyone have any questions or comments before we move on to our next speakers? All right, I believe, Erica, do we have Karen listed as next? Okay, so Karen Farmer from Edmond Schools is going to present to us, and Karen is was one of our spotlight psychologists that we highlighted a couple of weeks ago for her work within COVID-19 and the adaptations and how she's working with schools and kind of creative ways of making sure students are receiving services. So Karen?
Hi. Yes, I'm Karen Farmer, and I apologize. When we went into like COVID mode, my family kicked me out to the garage. So that's what this is, so that they could have continued peace and quiet. And even though we're on summer vacation, I still get kicked out to the garage. So that's what this all is. Anyway, so yeah. Hi, I'm Karen Farmer. I am a school psychologist in Edmond Public Schools, and I primarily handle all of the Sooner Start evaluations for our district. And so when we went into COVID-19 and the 257 policy changes in 2 months, as a state and as a nation, with trying to figure out how we're going to be handling special education services and evaluations and so forth. When our state presented in a guidance document that they were going to maintain the expectation that deadlines for students transitioning from Sooner Start and so forth were going to be maintained, we decided, so I guess also it's some additional background. While my primary responsibility are the Sooner Start evaluations, I have an exceptional team that works with me. So we have the speech language pathologist consultant that helps do our Sooner Start evaluations, as well as an OT PT that's assigned to us. And then also we work intimately with a consultant for the preschool special education program. So and his official job title is that he's our preschool program specialist. So together, all of us do our evaluations together in a team model. And so we kind of put our heads together to think about, okay, so if the expectation is that we maintain meeting these students' deadlines and so forth, and we need to move to doing virtual evaluations because we can't do in person anymore, how can we do this? And you know, in doing evaluations and so forth, all of us know as experienced school psychologists that parent input and parent input on behavior rating scales and so forth can look a little bit different than, you know, maybe what the data that's collected in person. And so since we can't collect data in person, what's another method that we can do that? And so we came up with the idea of trying to work with families to do video clips of the children and do those video clips within 3 minutes or less so that they can be emailed effectively to us so that we can incorporate that into our evaluation and combining previous records, current records. We do a very comprehensive parent interview that sometimes can last up to 2 hours trying to collect information about what's going on with the child, but combining this piece of data so we can actually see the child and do what's know what's going on with them. We also chose to do video clips because if any of you have ever experienced a 2-year-old and Zoom or Google Meet, etc., don't always match, right? So, so that can be a little bit tricky sometimes. So that's also why we opted to do the video clips. I'm going to share my screen. I have so as a team, we decided to, let me go over to that, sorry. First, let me say that as a team, we put together a template of possible developmental tasks that would be potentially easier for a parent to do in the home setting. So we know that they don't always have every single toy on the face of the planet, especially things that we would have in the testing session, etc. So coming up with things that the parent could easily do at home. And then what we also do is that we take this template and we tailor it to every evaluation based upon the individual needs of the child. And okay, so going over to that document, let me share my screen. So this is a copy of the template that we created, and I've shared an open public link to this with OSPA. So OSPA is more than welcome to share this document, and then I'll also add a link in the comment section and so forth. But what we've essentially done is that taking some suggestions to parents for like how to take the video clips and so forth. In the purple are the different tasks that we have brainstormed and come up with for parents to do. So first and foremost, we often just want to see the child in spontaneous play. So what are they just naturally doing in their play? And anyone who is kind of, you know, in that early childhood world knows that spontaneous play is the most authentic way to assess what a child naturally is able to do. So you get a spontaneous language sample, you understand the skills that they are working on through the play that they're demonstrating. You can already see if they're moving forward from just like sensory exploration to cause and effect to make believe and pretend play. Are they working? Is there a level of social interest that happens within their spontaneous play? How much social interest is happening? What are they seeking to experiment with? And then you can also see fine motor and gross motor happening within what they're interested in playing with as well. So there's so much that you can see within just the child you know, demonstrating some spontaneous play. And that is honestly probably one of the easiest things that a parent can video. So, you know, just, you know, take a quick video, snapshot of what the child is doing and so forth. The rest of the tasks are a little bit more structured, but again, trying to tailor it to what the parent can do at home. So we have coloring and some recommendations. So we have materials that are needed for that and recommendations for how, what the parent can do. And then, so sorry, I also forgot to add that. So while the purple is a demonstration task, the blue is what we are looking for, the domain areas that we're targeting within that developmental task. And then the white is based upon the conversations that we're having with the parent, especially during that elaborate parent interview, how may this task be tailored to the individual needs of the child? So, and of course, some of these tasks are deleted, like if this isn't in an area of concern or we need to target this, or we may seek to modify it, etc. Another task that we have is building a block tower. We have snack time. We have reading a book with a loved one. And then we also have some gross motor. So just in general, like active whole body movement, like for instance, walking up and down a curb or stairs or running, etc., and then throwing a ball. So, and then of course, like I said, we may add stuff, we may take away and that kind of thing. And then I make a copy of this for every evaluation that we do that's tailored to the student, and then I email this to the parent. So, but in general, like it seemed, this is what we try to start off with, but I think that like with everything, sorry, I was reading some of the comments. Like with everything, you know, implementation and fruition sometimes is a little bit messier than the greatest ideas. So, so what we've, in going with this format, what we've discovered, so moving forward with some recommendations, first and foremost, is that while we try, because parents have a lot on their plate and they have a lot that they're dealing with, especially, you know, if they're having to work from home and be also their child care provider and, you know, all this other kind of thing, that we don't want to stress them out. We don't want them to feel unnecessary stress. And they're also, most parents are not examiners in nature. They are not evaluators of children. So they don't know all of those individual aspects that someone is looking for. So that can be tricky as well. So the clips that we have gotten back have been sweet and delightful, but maybe not as targeted as what we had hoped. And so moving forward, our team would like to first try to create a unified format for families to send in the video clips, because everybody is a little bit different in their technology knowledge. So, and how to send those video clips. So we're working on that, as well as trying to provide examples of what can happen during those video clips so that parents may better understand about what it is that we're actually looking for. So just some recommendations if, you know, in moving forward for anybody else that's seeking to do that.
Karen, thank you so much for that resource. It is amazing, and it is, I think, just such a beautiful demonstration of taking the parts that you know and forging forward in ways that are meaningful. And I appreciate your work with that. And again, I just think it really highlights how even in uncertain times, we can take things that we already know and just think outside of the box. And I love how you particularly integrate it with your team, and that you take a team approach to it and that you developed it together. So thank you so much for sharing that. I think, Karen, you can see the comments. Do you have a shareable template for the parent interview that you could share?
I can put something together. Our team in general knows what each respective discipline is doing, and has kind of our own questions. But I do have a general template that we have already put together for what our virtual evaluations look like as a whole. But as far as the specific questions like that are asked during the interview, I will only be able to share like what is used. I can't share individual questions because that team member has their questions, if that makes sense. So
got it. I think that would be appreciated if you have time. Thank you.
Sure, no problem.
Are there other questions in the box, or feel free to unmute if anybody has a question for Karen and her great work. Okay, amazing. And if you think of any, just feel free to put them in the chat box. And we're going to move now into our next presenter, and that's Taylor Plunkett. And I'm very excited. She just graduated with her master's from UCO, and she will be interning at Putnam City Schools next year. And one of the things that I think is so interesting is think back to your internship year and how that may have looked not actually being in a school. And so I'm really looking forward to hear Taylor's perspective and what she's doing, because it's so different from what most of us did in terms of she received that last year practicum, not entirely physically in a school setting. So Taylor, if you're ready to go, I'm gonna mute and let you present your work for us.
Hi, everyone. I'm Taylor, and like Dr. Ollinger said, I just graduated from UCO, and I'm going to start my internship at Putnam City. For the past 2 school years, I've been working with Behavior Central, and Behavior Central is funded by the Special Education Services Division of the Oklahoma State Department of Education, and it's housed at the University of Central Oklahoma. Today, I'm going to just kind of share how we had to modify the consultation and collaboration piece, and how we used research and evidence-based practice domain to do that. Before COVID-19, Behavior Central provided behavior consultation to schools across the state of Oklahoma. The behavior coaches would go in after we got the referral, we'd observe the student, we would conduct an FBA or FA if we needed to, and then develop a behavior plan for the teachers to use. We'd then go back to the school and teach the plan and help coach to the teacher as they implemented it in the classroom. And then we also taught the teachers how to collect data and how to look at the data to see if the behavior was changing. Since COVID-19, we obviously haven't been able to go into the schools, but we still wanted to provide support to teachers and parents. We started creating training videos that teachers and parents can access with YouTube. So if you go on to YouTube and just put in the search bar Behavioral Central OK, there are about 30 training videos that will come up. Our videos explain how to implement evidence-based intervention strategies while making the language easy to digest and understand. We really wanted to make sure that people who weren't familiar with ABA terms would still be able to implement the strategies that we were talking about. So the main goal of the training videos are to assist teachers in the classroom or with distance learning, and then also to assist teachers in training parents. Like, for example, we have a video that teaches how to use behavior skills training. So the teacher can use that as a tool to train a parent or to train a teacher assistant or a paraprofessional in the classroom. We talk about positive reinforcement, and honestly, we probably talk about positive reinforcement in every video that we have. We talk about how effective it is and how important it is to pair it with other interventions. We have a video on how to use a token economy and how to set that up in your classroom. We talk about the functions of behavior and how to reinforce those appropriately. We talk about discrete trial training, extinction, and timeout from reinforcement and how to use that appropriately as well. And we even talk about how to talk to kiddos about social distancing, since we know that it can be a difficult conversation to have with little ones. And I know at one point, Dr. Scott Singleton asked what people were needing help with specifically, and we created some videos based on those needs. So we have some that are kind of broad topics and some that are very specific examples and situation scenario type things. So something like self-care and SPED burnout, and Trisha Goga actually helped us with how to talk to, she did a interview on how to talk to children about COVID-19 and the pandemic. We have a video on visual supports and how to use those, and then really specific improving attention during distance learning. So we have a really wide variety of videos that are there for anyone to use. So please definitely share this resource with your team and let them know that Behavioral Central wants to support our teachers in this difficult time. That's all I have to share. I can link the Behavior Central video page from YouTube too in the comments.
Thank you, Taylor. I'll say just kind of personally, I was able to, with a consultation case that I had, I needed a parent to start working on accepting no as something. And so I was able to directly link to videos on that and then skill development. So it's already been a useful resource. And yeah, if you can post that link, because I think that's going to be something that kind of the nice thing coming out of this crisis, like we're developing these tools that have a lot, they're easier to share. And so these are going to be tools that we'll be able to use even beyond the crisis. So thank you.
Great. Thank you for sharing that.
And I will also just add, if you haven't seen the videos, most of them are also in very digestible chunks. So, you know, I feel like my whole life is segmented right now into 1 hour webinars and 1.5 hour webinars, but they're not that long. They're very digestible for a parent or for teachers. And so particularly if you're helping plan your reentry planning and your professional development, as schools start back, just know that those are, you know, nice little snippets, and they're not overwhelming in terms of length, which I find helpful. And did we have questions specifically to Taylor about Behavior Central?
I don't think so. I see that Tricia posted a link, I believe, to the videos on YouTube, and then Santa asked a question for Karen.
Okay, Karen, are you still with us? I can't see you on my screen.
Yes, I'm here. I'm sorry.
Okay. No, it's no problem. We just had a question in the chat. How do parents respond to completing the tasks and videos? And she said, I can tell now that I would need to simplify verbiage or edit templates and discuss the template and the video task on the phone with the parent. So how do they respond, I think is the question.
100%. So definitely things have to be simplified for the parent, especially based upon the parent's level of understanding of what is expected. So I would say that that's part of what happens during the parent interview. So, and I think that any of us that are used to doing parent interviews and so forth you already have a natural inclination to, based upon the feedback that you're getting from the parent in the moment, to you know, change your wording or your verbiage to help facilitate the parent's understanding. So that just naturally happens during the parent interview. And then I hope that I'm answering this correctly. Then after we've completed the parent interview, then and we get to the end and we're talking about the video clips that the parent can submit, we're tailoring that according to what it sounds like the parent can provide, as well as what we're needing. So for instance, since the children are already in Sooner Start and they have used to doing virtual teletherapy with their providers, a lot of times the parents have already worked out with the provider a means of doing that. So for instance, utilizing YouTube. So like some of our parents already have a YouTube account set up where they have already uploaded some tasks and we're utilizing those. Some other parents just already had some things that were saved to their phone, etc., that kind of thing. Other parents, they've just been utilizing phone conferencing, or they haven't been doing much of anything with their provider, and so this is new for them. So just trying to work with them about what needs to happen and what we need to see. We haven't had any parent that has had a problem with trying to submit something. So everyone has been on board and been open to it. So when we first offer the evaluation, we let them know in advance that this is a component of it, and we haven't had any resistance. Everybody's been on board. I hope that I answered that correctly.
Hey, Santa, give me a thumbs up if that helped answer your question.
She said, thank you.
Oh, she said,
Okay.
okay. Oh, yes, there it is. I see it in the chat. Awesome. Okay. Other questions for our presenters today? We have a question. I think it is maybe to Karen, but maybe to the group as well. Is your team including any additional validity statements for decisions made via virtual assessment? So perhaps in the report or in the MEGS, are you including any statements that speak to potential threats to validity? I think that's what the question's asking, Karen.
Yes. So not as much in the report, but definitely in the special education eligibility paperwork in the MEGS summary information. So in our state policy and procedure manual or handbook, the state special education handbook. Sorry, that was old verbiage from like 2005, I don't know. It states in there that when a standardized measure cannot be utilized, that a functional assessment can be utilized to determine the student's areas of need. And so when we are, so in the written notice, in the MEAG section, etc., it is definitely stating that because an in-person evaluation cannot be completed, a functional assessment is being utilized, and the assessment results are considered as valid as what can be considered given the parameters of the evaluation.
Thanks, Karen. I love that. And just for any